like the scene with the Bosnians, where my character fights with the Bosnian couple. We had really shortlisted that, and we had all of this coverage. And when we actually got there and started shooting, it was pouring with rain, and we realized we wanted to just shoot in the rain, and we realized it would just be much better in one long take.
We were shooting it and we realized, oh, this is like, if we can pull this off, and it was like 100 mil lens, like handheld with you know, following all this crazy action, and it was just a nightmare to try to pull focus. But once we realized what it could be if we could nail it, we realized, okay, let's just abandon all coverage and spend 5 hours nailing this shot. And so we did, you know, 15 long takes in the rain, trying to get that one shot right.
I think there were two where
two usable takes.
You know, I'm glad you actually had mentioned the thing of Madeleine when you throw up in that scene, because I actually wrote in my notes of like, how are they pulling this off? Because so that makes sense actually if it was real. It actually, I think it calls attention to sort of your role as both the writer, Madeleine, as a writer, director, and actor in this. One of the things I thought of earlier as you were kind of referencing your past experience, it being sort of really re-traumatizing and kind of unsafe feeling, first was a question of if that was part of the motivation for you taking on that role, is it gave you a sense of safety, of you're not imposing that on someone new, you can sort of set your own boundaries. And then, you know, beyond that question too, of what other elements of having that element of control over it, were you able to sort of make those sort of decisions, like in that scene saying like, it's important that I do this, when as opposed to asking another actor to have to do that for herself?
Yeah, it was such a demanding role, and I think we knew that it was one of the reasons that we decided that I would play it, because we knew that we could push me way further than we could push another actor, and that I wanted to go for it. There were several things, like there was a shot we got right at the end of the shoot where it was a wide that we didn't actually end up using it in the film, but it was a wide of me swimming across the lake back towards the cottage, and we didn't end up shooting it until early October, and it was freezing. We had one take of that because the lake was just so cold. It was like swimming in an ice bath. But we could never have asked an actor.
That was a super dangerous shot that where Madeleine almost got hypothermia, but it was crazy. But yes, it's crazy the lengths I think Madeleine's willing to push herself to. And honestly, it was, you just hated seeing, like, we knew that like this moment's so vital, like she's doing something horrific, but we wanted to show you that she's still human, that she's repulsed by her own actions. And so if the puke looked like soup coming out of her mouth, or a vomit rig, which really those are the main two options, or some CG effect,
it would either just be weak or it would be funny.
Yeah.
And maybe people do find it funny, but at least it's got kind of a visceral,
and
gross quality to it.
And so really, like, the challenge was trying to figure out how to do that safely. And we were looking into like EpiCac, which is like, I think it's legal in the US, but it's illegal in Canada. So then we realized, and we looked into why, and it destroys your esophagus. So we realized, okay, we cannot do that. And the safest approach was drinking a pint of egg whites and a pint of...
Well, it was just salt water. I just drank the egg whites because I thought it would be good to have something to throw up.
Right, okay. So it's just salt water. Don't do this at home. It's horrific.
And also I didn't know if it was going to work because I didn't want to test it on myself.
But we had a really amazing production designer and art director who actually like took it upon themselves to help us find the safe ways to do this, and they reported back to us their experiments that this does work. It works rather quickly.
So I take it that means they ran the test themselves and went, yep, this is effective. Like,
we can't say anything, any details, but they let us know that it.
Yeah. But what they didn't warn us is that when you drink a pint of salt water, your body thinks you're drowning. And so psychologically, you go through this process of actually thinking it's the end.
Well,
And
none of us knew that was going to happen.
yeah, no one, we didn't know that. So we use pretty much every second we can of that take, and
until
then,
I'm like, oh my God, help
and then
me.
Madeleine starts panicking, and then we have like a first aid person there, I'm there, and everyone's calm, and we're trying to figure it out, and we realize like, oh, this is the natural response of having now chugging a pint of salt water.
It was
and then
a
it
crazy,
subsided,
crazy
but
mental experience.
Yeah.
That's so fast. I'm so glad we got to this topic. This is like even more fascinating of an answer to it than I would have expected. I do want to kind of backtrack though to the discussion of cinematography, because I think the cinematography is astounding in this. It's really impressive. And one of the things I picked up on is there's this power dynamic at play between how the assault scene is shot and how the lead up to the, I guess you could call it the murder scene in some way, but the first bat scene where there's this amazing juxtaposition of like these close-ups during the assault scene feel so suffocating, and it in a way that like you almost don't expect. And then there's this sort of almost like female gaze that's built into that other scene of like, I thought it was so interesting doing like all these wide shots of him naked, and then like there was like the close-up of him in the erection right before like the beating over the head, and it was a really interesting thing of placing him in this position of vulnerability as well. So I know it's like a long tangent, but I'd love for you to just kind of unpack some of the thinking that went into the shooting of those scenes, which are different from some others that are much longer takes. You know, there was a lot more intercutting there and a lot of techniques that were used in the editing room as well to kind of build those scenes that way.
Yeah, do you want to editor?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the sexual assault, it became really clear to us while writing it that we wanted to try to pull the audience into Miriam's internal experience, which is really tricky to do because she's asleep and then she wakes up.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to try to capture that sense of shock and
kind of being
frozen, yeah, like there's a sort of out of body experience that she has, and making the audience feel trapped and claustrophobic and filled with anxiety as she's experiencing this. And at the same time recognizing that from Dylan's point of view, the brother-in-law, he sees this as consent, so it's not a violent, physically violent encounter in terms of the way we portrayed it. And that's really important to show the complexities of consent and how this person is unaware of what they have done, but there's no ambiguity in the assault itself, that it, for sure it has happened to her, and the experience that she has had hopefully is one that the audience then can share with her as the movie continues. And I think, you know, in this like subgenre of rape revenge, we're so used to women being sexualized, and
yeah, we didn't want the assault scene to feel titillating in any way. We wanted it to really just feel claustrophobic. As this kind of horror dawns on her, it's dawning on the audience as well.
We're just so used to also just seeing like in the act of revenge, you know, this woman who's scantily clad in a sexy, you know, outfit, trying to reclaim some kind of power, but using her sex in order to do it. And we wanted to kind of do the opposite in a way where she's stripping him of his power literally. And there's something really interesting about a fully nude man who's who's incredibly vulnerable and being disempowered in that moment, just before something really violent happens to them. And I think we're not used to seeing that. It actually, I think a lot of men are you know, incensed by that, or really upset of seeing that, just because you're not used to seeing you know, men being put in that position. And it's not,
and it is upsetting, but but it is also upsetting kind of, I mean, it's upsetting as a woman watching those kinds of films over and over and seeing women sexualized in a certain way, and if we didn't do it just for that reason, but that is part of it. It is, I mean, it's upsetting to Miriam to see see Dylan and hear his response to what's happened, and then seeing his naked body as well, it kind of provokes something in her.
Yeah, and if you ask yourself the question, like, why is it shocking to an audience that we're seeing this man in a wide shot nude? Why? What does it tell us about society, or the, you know, what our prejudices are, or biases? Because as an audience, if we were to flip that and it was a woman and we're in a wide, we wouldn't really think too much of it, I think. And I think that's part of what the film's trying to provoke, is making you think more deeply about how we represent male and female nudity on screen.
There was something really awesome being on set in the moments where I was on camera. So many times Dusty and Adam, our DP, would come up to me and say, we just want to check this shot with you, make sure that you don't feel like it's objectifying in any way. And I that's never happened to me before on a set. I appreciated it so much. And just the fact that they were checking in and asking me, because they're men, and it's not like because they're men they're going to objectify me, but they just wanted my take, and that was really refreshing.
Well, I mean, to that point too, it's part of it is we are conditioned to see films a certain way and expect films to be a certain way. So that's where, I mean, I think it was actually Judd Apatow who said at one point, like, America has like a pathological aversion to images of penises on film. But it's at the same time, as you said, like, even especially within this genre, the female body is constantly on display. So I love the cat that has joined you now. So it's, you know, it really is, though. I think that's part of what makes the scene jarring. And yet at the same time, I think what's so interesting about it, and in both scenes, you kind of get a sense of where they're both leading because of how you have structured the film itself. You know, like, there are times when those close-ups you do during the assault scene, like, I've seen those close-ups done romantically, like the real close, where you can almost see the goosebumps on the skin. And yet you feel this sense of dread pouring over you as it's happening, in part because you know what the context is, she's asleep, but also because of how the film has been framed, where you kind of have seen things fall apart in these different order. So it, you know, sticking with this theme of editing, I'd love for you just to talk more, because there's also individual shots that come in too, like the bug on the finger that sort of has all this meaning. And so I'd love to just hear you talk a little more about what went into kind of the process of narratively structuring this thing, and through that editing process.
Yeah, the bug on the finger was something that we really, for us, kind of encapsulated that feeling of her being frozen and unable to do anything.
It's also just like from our own personal experiences of abuse, like fixating on a specific object or a thing, and that object then becomes forever associated with that experience. Yeah, and I mean, the nonlinear structure of the film is something we were really kind of thinking of early on in the writing process. And it was really about trying to get the audience to really understand Miriam's emotional, psychological unraveling, and that it's really at its heart, it's about these two sisters and this betrayal that happens between the two of them. What Miriam thinks, she has a savior complex. She thinks she's protecting her sister from this person, but ultimately she's destroying her entire life in the process. So it was about finding a way in which we can kind of let the past speak to the present, so you can let them,
and then let the present pull you back into the past again. Yeah,
and there were some discoveries that were made, like, even though it was non-linear, I don't think the structure in the script was the scene in the tool shed, I don't think was followed directly by his feet coming up, but there was just like this beautiful juxtaposition of, like, he had this opportunity to acknowledge what he had done to her. She created a safe space for him to come clean, and that she says to him, we'll work this out, and he doesn't. There's just something really tragic about seeing him look at her leave, and then the very next thing is, you know, his body being pulled up like that.
So I want to invite the audience to kind of bring in some questions, since, you know, I know we only have limited time. while they're thinking of things, and for the audience, how it's going to work is you can ask your question, or if you want, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. And then I'm actually going to bring you up to the panel and invite you to, if you want, turn on your camera or ask the question. But if you don't want that to happen, just in the Q&A box, just specify and I'll read it for you. While we wait for their questions, you know, I have memories of when I was in college watching kind of like, with all due respect, like B-grade horror films on Shudder. And it was so fascinating to see this, which is like one of the more intense films I've seen in a while. And I know that this is part of sort of a different vision that they have as they've, you know, changed over the years. And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about sort of your relationship with them and how they sort of picked this up and kind of what that's been like in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, so we're the sole producers on the film, and that allowed us to not compromise anything that we wanted to do in the film. So, you know, we didn't have to censor the way the film was cut in any way. And it really is like uncompromising in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. But we knew kind of going in, we were closing a lot of doors in terms of sales. Like we've made something, even in, you know, forcing the audience to watch a long take of a woman have a panic attack, like little things like this that were really important to us, and knowing that it will alienate some audiences. I think it was, we felt very lucky to have found Shudder, and that Shudder was also revamping what their channel was doing. And they're really looking for challenging, intense films that don't just fit in one neat bucket. You know, it's not, this is a horror film in many respects, but it's also a drama. And it's also, you know, like it's a thriller or it's psychological. It's not,
it's patient. It's not,
and there's
not like it's super pacey.
There's art house components to it, which is makes it really not commercial in any way, like the full frontal nudity, the long lingering violence in the film, which seems to be worse than if you just had tons of like close-up shots of gore, which is ironic and crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when we were talking about, are we going to have to self-distribute the film, because we just didn't know if anyone was going to be interested. And I think Shudder embraced it so wholeheartedly, and they just really understood what we were going for and what we were trying to do.
And they were just excited about showing it as it was, and that was really important to us. And I mean, early on, I think, you know, you look for champions. It's, for us, it was on the festival circuit, it was Peter Kaplowski at TIFF who really like took a chance on the film in the midnight category, and then Heidi Swicker at Sundance. And it's those kinds of champions that then really allow someone like Shudder to take the film more seriously. Otherwise, it would have been really difficult to stay on their radar and for them to really consider the film. But we were really fortunate to have them on as like our partners for showing the film.
I think this is actually one of the main benefits of streaming services that kind of gets overlooked is, you know, because we think of it as this competition between all these big companies, but there's also an element of kind of indie voices getting platforms without having to self-censor in certain ways. Like, I do think it's a reflection of our society that a dismembering of a body would be an R-rated film, but an erect penis would be NC-17 and banned from. I mean, that's very much a reflection of like America's messed up kind of views of these things. But I think it is really interesting that sort of Shudder came in with this opportunity to kind of say we can be a platform for this kind of storytelling.
Yeah, and I think it's early on when you're talking to distributors. I think it's and sales agents. We were just really upfront about, because you know, you get asked the question, are you willing to do a TV cut, and if so, what would you change? And we just kind of went in like, no, we're if there's a TV version, it's not prime time. It's showing after hours.
We have a good question here from Bruce Brown. So Bruce, I'm going to bring you up to the panel. And as I said before, you are welcome to turn on your camera or not. See. Bruce, I see you've moved from attendee. Where'd you go? Did Bruce leave? Okay, something happened with Bruce. So, oh, here he is. Bruce, you're on now if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
you can't see me. Well, I typed it in real fast because usually on these Q&As, there's a lot of intelligent, thought-provoking, questions. And I thought, well, as I was watching it, of course, I'm way old. So the repulsion was, you guys remember where the walls are cracking as she's quote cracking up. And I had a friend that I saw with him, and he said, if that wall cracked one more time, I was out of the theater. It was quite a movie.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely revisited that film
Yeah.
while we were making this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think we watched a ton of really depressing, harrowing movies
yeah.
to prepare for making this.
It's good to kind of see when you're working within that genre, kind of what you want to stay away from or things that inspire you, just so that you know what you're getting yourself into.
If you don't mind, did you look at other movies in that genre? Because obviously like a little bit of a Memento where it's not exactly backwards, but it's all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like when we knew we wanted it to be nonlinear, we wanted to think about, okay, what are some comparables of nonlinear structures that we like? And actually Memento was what we didn't want.
It was actually Pulp Fiction that was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is maybe hard to see the connections here, but Memento, I love that movie, is so taxing on the audience because it's really, you have to put the narrative backwards in order, and it's every scene is forcing you to do that. So it's not just a sequence. In Pulp Fiction, there's like 7 or 8 sequences in that film, and it has its own internal logic that works, and it's thematic. It's really about the inevitability of these two characters and when they're headed, and the kind of like tragedy of that. And so that we recognized early on that was more what we were interested in doing, is trying to structure the film around Miriam's journey and not feeling forced to have to adhere to a certain structure that other films maybe have employed, but feel like there's some freedom. So definitely there was lots of research and us looking at other films for inspiration. But then there's sometimes where there's a movie where you haven't seen, where you almost don't want to watch it because you don't want it to
influence you too much. Yeah, exactly.
There were certain films where we just within the subgenre of rape revenge where we just, I don't know if I need to rewatch that movie again.
I thought there was a line in the movie where I got the impression that Marianne was single, but then in the I went back and looked at the email. It says her marriage is unraveling. So I missed that.
Yeah,
she's married.
She's on the brink of divorce.
Her marriage has just become very frosty, and she and her husband just have no idea how to fix it.
Yeah, so the film, I don't know if maybe you missed the opening of the film, but it starts with her in the car with her husband, and they arrive together at the cottage, and then we start to see that there's this kind of underlying tension between them, and she's kind of leaning on her brother-in-law and her sister for emotional support to try to navigate what to do with the marriage.
Yeah, I know Caleb I thought it was a significant other, and there was some line where maybe Greta said you're not married or something. I don't know, but so I missed that. And also it takes place in Canada. I wasn't sure because of the accents that maybe it was a Lake District of England, which I had not been to, so I didn't know if it looked like that. But anyway, that's on me missing that.
The Lake District, it's funny that you mentioned that, because the Lake District is where I used to go as a child to a cottage with my family. So I think when we found Quebec. There was definitely something in the countryside of the Lake District that that I found was kind of comparable.
Yeah, we shot in the Laurentians, which is a really beautiful mountainous region in Quebec. That hasn't really, like, usually you see it kind of in the wintertime because it's really a ski town. So really showing the fall and the summer colors was really,
yeah, we were
exciting.
Originally all the characters when we wrote the script were North American, and then when we decided actually to cast Anna as the sister, she's also English, and we just kind of were like, well, why don't since you are English, what's the point in both of you doing North American accents?
yeah.
Let's just have you be who you are.
And there was just something about drawing upon Madeleine's own experiences of being English and coming to Canada, and that feeling of being torn between two places that I think Miriam's feeling in the film.
Well, I should let other people ask their questions, but Madeleine, my hat's off. What a role. And I mean, for what you went through, and then the swimming in freezing, you know, there's a thing called spiritual failure, which I saw in research, where they put people in cold water to where they don't care if they live because there's a spiritual failure. They just reach that. And I could just empathize with you. And so my hat's off. Just great job, both of you.
Thank you. I
Thanks
could
so much.
imagine that happening after a while in that case.
Yes.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
So next up is Tavish or Tavish. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that.
I believe it's pronounced Tavish.
Is this someone from the crew? Do you recognize this name?
I
We do.
recognize that
Tavish,
name.
can we out you? Can we out?
Is this the Tavish I know? Maybe it's not. I don't know.
Hi, Dusty and Madeleine. Big fans of you guys. Thank you for this movie. It was a wonderful film. My question to you is, what sort of projects or ideas are you excited about moving forward into the future here?
Good question. Before we do that, I'm going to just really embarrassingly out Tavish as the incredibly brave person who drank that salt water, so I didn't have to test it.
Did
myself.
he drink it? I don't know if he drank it. Yeah, Tavish was our incredible art director who like painstakingly worked day and night doing all sorts of crazy things to make this movie possible.
Actually, one really cool thing about so many of the people on the crew is that they, like, Tavish is an excellent writer, and Josh Turpin, who was our production designer, is also a director, so that there was such an understanding for story that I think it really kind of bled through to the whole production.
But yeah, to answer your question, having like we're forced to watch this movie thousands of times, which
not quite thousands.
Well, it feels like
hundreds.
that, and which is torturous. So we want to write something that's completely different. So we're writing a dark comedy next.
We want to write something that you can watch once a year at Christmas and just have a really good time.
Yeah, there's still like some violence in there and some
yeah.
wicked, crazy fun, but it's but yeah, something that's completely different. I think one thing we're noticing though, and this is maybe interesting to the students and who are here, is that when you make your first feature, everyone just sees you as that, right? So, you know, you can easily argue this is not really horror, or it's slanted, more drama, but all we get now is just horror scripts from people, and so it's really important, though we love horror, is to really showcase that we have a wide range of tastes as filmmakers, and that there's a lot of different genres and stories that we want to tell.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tavish, and great work on the film as well. You've made invaluable contributions, it sounds. I know the two of you are kind of pressed for time, so I'm gonna let you go since we're kind of out of audience questions. But I'm so grateful to have been able to talk to you both today. This really was a wonderful film, and it was great to sort of hear some of your insights into it. So
yeah, thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone who watched and stuck around, and
really appreciate it.
All right, thanks for being here. I look forward to the next one.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.